Today on The Intentional Life, I'm going to share with you how you could know if you're being lazy, how to speak and talk like Jesus, the dangers of casual sex, by the way, by a non-Christian sociologist, psychoanalyst, and I'm going to book review the book Think Faster, Talk Smarter, which is about speaking spontaneously in meetings, being called on, question and answers, and a little bit of like public speaking as well, how we can be better prepared to speak in front of people. Moving into our first section, as always, our intentionality corner. Here is how to know if you are being lazy. Let me read some thoughts that I've written and then kind of give you some things to take away from it. Being busy, in my opinion, is actually a form of laziness. It is lazy both in thought and in action. It is lazy in thought because it assumes that busyness is out of your control, as if we are the victim while completely neglecting the fact that we choose how to spend our time. Again, at least in how we often use the word busy in our modern day and age today, we say we're busy with the like, how's it going? Oh, things are busy. And it's like this idea of like, man, I wish my life weren't so busy, but there's nothing I can do about it. Reality is, man, you control your life, you control your time. So it makes it like we're the victim, we're neglecting the fact that we can choose how we spend our time. It's also lazy in action because most of our busyness comes from a lack of planning. So we'll spend hours scrolling on our phones or watching TV and distracting ourselves at work instead of actually focusing in on the task at hand. Now, hear me, I am not against using your phone. I am not against TV or distractions or taking a break or having a good time. Taking breaks and doing things that you enjoy are absolutely important, but I am against assuming that we are busy when our busyness is actually self-inflicting. That is what I'm against. So, for example, if you want to be in a better spot financially, you have to do the unlazy work of budgeting. If you want to be in a better spot in your career, you have to do the unlazy work of training and getting better and being intentional about growth and development. If you don't want to be lazy, then you have to do the hard work of being intentional with your time. Again, busy may sound impressive to others, but just remember that busyness is a choice. It is not a virtue. Busyness is a choice. It is not a virtue. It is easy, therefore, to be lazy, and that's why we are prone to say we are busy. Being busy is most often used as a mask for avoiding the few critically important but uncomfortable actions that you and I need to take. So again, we use this idea of busy, like, oh, there's nothing I could do about it if only my life was different. And that kind of shields us from actually having to face the fact that we actually dictate and control what we do with our time, focus, and attention. Now, a couple of thoughts. Hear me, this is not a knock against rest or doing things that are relaxing or just hanging out or sometimes just vegging out. I am not against these things. And I'm not always saying you have to be productive in doing things. That is not true or healthy either. However, it is just easy to say that we are busy because it makes it seem like we have no control, that we are not in control. Well, I wish I could do that thing, but I'm just busy. Or I wish I could pursue that hobby, but I'm just busy. I wish I could get in shape, eat better, be healthier, whatever, but I wish I could take time off, but I've just got too many things going on. However, again, if we were to prioritize our time differently, we actually could do many of the things that we say we are too busy to get to. Now, ironically, here's what's ironic. Productive people often, in my experience, don't talk about themselves as busy. So, over the years, especially as a pastor, I get to interact with lots of different people. And many of the more successful, at least financially, maybe leaders in their business, maybe business owners, entrepreneurs, these type of things, the people that like the average person would say, hey, man, you must be really busy. I have just noticed personally in my conversations with these people is that they very rarely talk about like this idea of I'm just so busy. In fact, what I've seen is like the people that typically are more accomplished or get more things done, there's like an inverse of times they use the word busy. So it's typically that the people that kind of have more going on don't use busy as much. The people that actually could have a lot more going on talk about how busy they are. Now, here's the thing. It requires focus to do things that matter. It requires focus. But I can also say it does not require more time than the next person. And actually, I would submit to you, it requires much less time than you think to actually do the things that you think are important or you want to accomplish in life. It actually takes less time. It just takes being focused. And so, again, in my experience, some of the things that people who use the word busy often to describe themselves, they think, well, I can't do what the other person does because I just don't have their time. When in reality, man, if you would shift how you spend your time and your focus, the time is not the problem. It's not the problem. It's just how you spend your time. In fact, here's what's interesting. It requires focus to do things that matter, yes, but it's not require more time than the next person. Actually requires much less time than you think. And here's why. Habits actually become autopilot. They become autopilot. And so when you look at someone that says, man, that person must get a lot done. I don't know how they're always doing all these things or juggling all these balls or whatever. It's not that they actually like need more mental energy, because a lot of the things they're doing are habitual, and habits don't take mental energy to execute. It's just the thing that you do next or in this day or this certain period of time. And so from the outside, it can look like somebody who's got their life together is really, really disciplined. And I'm not saying that there wasn't discipline to get there, but I am saying the people that you might think are really disciplined in your life, what they really have is a lot of habits. They've created a lot of habits and rhythms and practices in their life. And so they're not always wondering, okay, well, when should I do this thing? Or when should I get to this thing? It's like, no, man, here's when I do this thing. Here's the time. Here's the place. And it just happens at this time every day or every week or every month. It's actually autopilot. So it looks like, man, I don't know how to do those things. And for them, it's not like you're spending all the time thinking about it. It's just like, here's how I have designed my life. Now, here's the challenge. What is one area of your life right now, I would say, that isn't where you want it to be? And how, therefore, is laziness, not actual busyness, getting in the way? How is laziness? So for example, I don't put this on my calendar. I don't prioritize or focus when I'm going to do it. I'm just kind of scrolling on my phone, or every night I'm just kind of watching Netflix or playing video games or whatever. And again, I'm not against these things. But I am against like an unintentionality with your time. Therefore, it seems like you never have time to do the thing that you want to do. So where in your life right now is one area where you like to see improvement, and you think the issue is busyness, when in fact, it's actually laziness, that you actually could do it if you would just set up a habit of doing it. Now, here's my encouragement. If you can identify a place in your life where that is true of you, what you don't need to do is tomorrow the next week, I'm going to spend 5 hours doing this thing, or I'm going to spend an hour a day, 3 days a week, starting tomorrow doing this thing. That is too much. You need to start very, very small and very, very doable. So much so that when you start out doing it, it doesn't really feel like work, because again, you want to create the habit, not the mental energy to, I have to do this thing, kind of like the self-will to make it happen. So again, where's one area of your life right now that isn't where you want it to be? And how is laziness, not actual busyness, getting in the way? If you can just be honest and identify, the problem is not busyness. The problem is I'm being a little bit lazy in this area. Make a small, easy habit today or this week that you can start, and then you'll see a lot more disciplined life. You'll see busyness, quote unquote, busyness go down, and you'll actually have the time to do the things you want to do. Moving on to our faith reflection, I want to spend a few minutes talking about how we can speak like Jesus using a very famous passage in James, or looking at a couple verses in the book of James. Now, this in the book of James, the previous section leading up to this was about works. So this section is on words. The previous section about works. So James is like very, very practical. So I want to pick up in James chapter 3 here, James chapter 1, verse 26. Before he's talking about, how you live your life, and then he's going to talk about how you speak. Now, before I do, I want to read a passage or a verse from Jesus in Matthew chapter 12 to set this up. Jesus in Matthew 12:37 says this: "For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned." And so I just want to say, what's interesting is we often think, am I a good person based on my actions? Am I a good or bad person? Will God accept me, especially if you're not a follower of Jesus and you think that your acceptance to God is based on being more good than bad? We often think of how good I am as a person based on what I do. For Jesus, it's not just what you do, it's what you say. That you may not in fact beat someone up, or you may not in fact murder someone, but if you speak like really gossipy or negatively about people all the time, just because you haven't like actually gone and done something, doesn't mean like what you're doing is actually good. And so James then picks this section up in James, identifies the control of the tongue as one of the clearest examples of true religion. So true religion, according to James, is honoring to God and following Jesus and the commands he's given us. And one of the best ways you can show whether or not you are following Jesus and honoring God is how you control your tongue. So James says this in James chapter 1, verse 26. He says, if anyone thinks he is religious without controlling his tongue, his religion is useless and he deceives himself. So how we speak matters. You can give a lot of money away and you can be really kind and you can serve people with your actions. But if you don't control how you speak, man, you're following God, you're honoring God is actually useless and you are deceiving yourself. In some ways, it's why in James chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, verse 1, start here. Here's what James says. He says, not many, let me give you a practical example. He says, not many should become teachers, my brothers, because you know that we will receive a stricter judgment. So what is James talking about here when he's talking about this idea of a teacher? Because again, teachers are going to speak and they're going to receive a stricter judgment. So he says, hey, listen, not many of you should become teachers, or if you should be very careful. Now, what is James talking about here? Well, in the early Jewish Christian church, a teacher would have had a good amount of prestige, just like a lot of religious leaders of any religion in the ancient world, because in a society where a very low percentage of people could read, and a very low percentage of people had opportunity for advancement in social status. In other words, what you were born into is what you had, and most people were poor and illiterate, so they couldn't educate themselves necessarily. One of the ways you could stand out, or you could maybe advance your social status, is in religion, by becoming a religious teacher, because then you would learn to read, you would learn to study, you get access to certain materials that the average person would not have. And so what James is saying here is, don't seek the status of a teacher or a rabbi or a pastor or a community leader, maybe if you want to make it more relevant today, without the necessary moral and intellectual qualifications. That it could be that James is writing this because the issue he's writing about stems from unfit teachers not leading people to pursue godliness. So be careful in James' context of being someone of high status, of education, of intellect, of being in a position where people are going to look up to you and listen to you if you don't have the moral foundation to go with it. Also, James grounds this warning because teachers, he says, will have a stricter judgment. So here's why you need to be careful. Teachers will have a stricter judgment. And again, in his context, he's mostly talking to, Christian leaders. James says that we here, because he is also applying this warning to himself. So he says, because you know that we, even including James, will have a stricter judgment. Now, why? Well, as we will see, the tongue is really hard to control. So a teacher, especially a religious teacher, can expose themselves to a greater danger of judgment, either in how they speak down to others or how they lead them astray in their teaching. If more people are listening to you speak and you don't have control of your tongue, then things will not necessarily go well for you. And so while he mentions teachers in particular here in verse 1, most likely religious teachers, it is not because only teachers or religious teachers or pastors should heed what he is about to say. I think rather this is also an example to check all of our motives, for you to check your motives. That listen, if you want to teach or have prestige, at least in the ancient culture, here is why you need to be careful. Maybe today, if you want to be an influencer, or have authority or have social clout, you need to be careful. And here's why. Verse 2 of chapter 3, James says this, for we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is mature, able to control the whole body. Now, we all know what it is like to speak before thinking. Now, you say something and immediately you wish you could take it back. Speech is just one of the many ways that we can stumble, of course, but he's calling this out here. And according to James, controlled speech is a sign of great maturity. That if you control your speech and how you talk and how you communicate, you can control your other impulses and desires as well. Because again, it's so easy to just fly things off the cuff and not think before you speak, that if you actually can be mature in how you communicate, well, then you also have a very good chance of being mature in other areas of your life. In Proverbs 18, verses 6 and 7, Proverbs says this, a fool's lips lead to strife, and his mouth provokes a beating. A fool's mouth is his devastation, and his lips are a trap for his life. So again, James is saying, those who aspire to be teachers or leaders or influencers, listen, you need to be careful about this. Now, for us, perhaps it's best not to think of being a pastor or in ministry, although this is what James is speaking to. The general, more applicable thing to everybody here, it's not just about being in ministry, but maybe in advancing in your career or having power and authority or being an influencer, a following, social media, all that sort of thing, that if you desire this, you need to understand the weight of your desire. And so what James is really saying here is, listen, you will be judged by your words. We will be judged by our words, how we speak, what we say, not just what we do. Again, what we do matters. But the old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is not true. That you can sin mightily with your words, and they matter. And they can bring either good judgment upon you from God or bad judgment upon you from God based on how you speak. So, for example, let me just give some practical examples. Some people might say, well, I've never physically abused my spouse. I'm a good husband. I'm a good wife. Okay, but how do you talk to them? I've never actually harmed my coworker. Sounds great, but how do you talk to them or about them when they are not there? I've never actually wronged the president or my teacher or my boss. Great, but have you slandered them? This is what's going on here. How are you speaking about them matters. Again, according to James, it is actually harder to control your tongue than your actions. Again, James 1:26, if anyone thinks he is religious without controlling his tongue, his religion is useless and he deceives himself. So again, I'm a quote unquote good person in my actions, but not my speech means I'm actually not all that of a good person. And then here, James quickly is going to give 3 examples to show he is not exaggerating about the importance of our speech. So James 3, verses 3 through 5, he says this, now if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we direct their whole bodies. And consider ships. Though very large and driven by fierce winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So too, the tongue is a small part of the body. It boasts great things. Consider how small a small fire sets ablaze a large forest. So again, just as an example, a trained 1,000-pound horse can be directed by a 50-pound child with a bit in its mouth. So if you have like an 8-year-old child who knows how to ride a horse and can lead it by just having a bit in its mouth, a 1,000-pound horse can be led by a 50-pound child. A big ship is directed proportionally by a very small part, the rudder. A forest fire is set ablaze by something that is incomparably small at the size of compared to the size of the forest, and even the fire that it turns into, which is just the spark, very incomparably tiny. And so when the tongue is not restrained, as small as it might be compared to the rest of your body, your life is likely to be uncontrolled and undisciplined also if you can't contain how you speak. Now, think of it this way. Do you know anyone who is really wise and mature, has really good habits and discipline in their life, who is also at the same time very uncontrolled in how they talk about others and how they speak about others? Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not just referring to foul language. I mean, I don't think it's, generally speaking, wise to use. I think it's more wise and kind and caring not to use that language. I'm not saying someone who uses foul language but isn't demeaning towards others. I just mean that is there someone in your life that you respect in all areas of their life, but how they speak, you're like, man, I don't respect that. The answer is probably not. Probably not. My guess is the people that you really respect in your life who are disciplined and have their life together, and maybe someone you want to aspire to, generally speaking, how they speak about others or to others is mature and controlled. They're not going around gossiping, talking behind people's back, that sort of thing. These go together. So now I'm not saying that there are not powerful people who are immature and are extremely unwise and unloving in their speech. I'm not saying that's just true. I'm just asking if you can think of anyone you actually respect like that. And again, I'm not just talking about foul language. I do think, somebody, generally speaking, could use foul language and still be somewhat controlled in their speech. I don't think it's wise, but I do think it could happen. I'm just talking about someone who is negative towards others, tears people down, talks behind their back. Is there anyone that you actually respect in your life that does that? Probably not. And then finally in verse 6, he says this, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue, a world of unrighteousness, is placed among our members. It stains the whole body, sets the course of life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. So again, James is saying that our little tiny tongue can destroy literally everything in our life. that it uncontrolled, it can burn everything down and literally partners with Satan in its destruction and to bring death and destruction. And the word James uses here for hell is the Greek word Gehenna. Again, he's showing his connection to Jesus' teachings in his book. Because actually, in the New Testament, only Jesus uses the phrase Gehenna in the New Testament to describe hell, which he uses it 11 times to describe hell. Only Jesus, other than James here, who's clearly referencing back to Jesus, uses that. It is in Gehenna in the ancient world in the Old Testament was a place where child sacrifice, pagan worship, and cult prostitution took place. It then became a massive trash heap with fires that continually burned when the faithful godly king of Israel came back into power. And then, of course, up until Jesus' day, it was a place of trash. And they would burn things there, they would throw things there so that people would never want to rebuild any of those false pagan temples. It was not a great place to be. Again, wounds caused by sticks and stones can be healed a lot easier than damage caused by words. And you know this, again, every single one of us can think back or bring to your mind something that was said to you when you were in grade school that to this day, still affects you. Like, man, you were 10 years old and some kid said something flippant or some teacher said something flippant to you, and it still impacts you. It still affects you. In fact, in some ways, it may be it may be altered some of the decisions you made growing up because of what someone said to you. And in the same way, I would say this: how many of us have a scratched up knee from recess that still bothers you to this day? Probably not very many of us. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can absolutely devastate you. So all that to say, I want to maybe wrap up by saying this: what you say will often be more destructive than what you do. What you say will often be more destructive than what you do. Again, how many of us right now wish we could go back and take something back that you said? I think absolutely all of us could go back right now and take back things that we said. How many of those things that you wish you could take back, even to make it worse, did you not even mean? You were just mad. You were trying to make a point. You were trying to make someone feel bad. And so you said something that you genuinely didn't even mean. You didn't even mean when you said it, but you just wanted to make a point. I mean, how many of us have that? I think all of us have that. The moment just got the better of you, and now the receiver of those words is still impacted by you today based off what you said. I think all of us have things we could take back. In fact, sometimes I think about things that I must have said to people growing up that I don't even remember, because obviously people have said things to you, and let's be honest, you've said things to other people. And so sometimes when I preach, preach on this, or right now as I'm teaching on a topic on how we speak, I always wonder, as I'm literally sharing this, if somebody in the back of their mind is talking to, or thinking to themselves, or maybe having a conversation at this very minute and saying, yeah, when I was in the 8th grade, there was this kid named Dylan and he said this to me. He said this to me. So again, what you say will often be more destructive than what you do. In the way of Jesus, be mature, kind, compassionate, thorough, and wise in how you speak. Now we're going to move to our cultural analysis. I might try something a little bit different for this one today, and you can let me know if you like it. Maybe we can do it more like this in the future. I want to share about a 1-minute-ish clip from Erica Komisar. Erica Komisar, she's a psychoanalyst, author, and a parent coach. I don't think she's Christian, but what she says here is really striking. The Christian thing will matter in a second. Her most recent book is Chicken Little, The Sky is Falling: Raising Resilient Adolescents in the New Age of Anxiety. Now, I listened to a clip on X, formerly known as Twitter, where she talks about the dangers of casual sex. So what I'm going to do, if those of you that are watching us on YouTube, I'm just going to hold up my iPad into the mic so you can hear the clip. I have it sped up a little bit, so this is 1 minute and 13 seconds, although I have it on 1.5 speed, so it's going to be a little less than a minute. But check out what she says about casual sex, again, a non-Christian here, and then I want to give you some thoughts and reflections on that. Now, for reference here, she's talking about the dating app Tinder. The dating app Tinder.
Tinder has an ad that says, meet the love of your night. It takes something so sacred and intimate, and it turns it into something unimportant and dangerous. It's causing them to feel more depressed, more anxious, more embarrassed, having more regrets, self-esteem issues. It's got some major implications. 72% of young men and 82% of women are feeling depressed and anxious after these casual sexual encounters. Tinder has an ad that says, meet the love of your night. What it does is it takes something so sacred and intimate, and it turns it into something not just casual, but it turns it into something irrelevant, unimportant, and dangerous, if you ask me, emotionally dangerous. And it can be physically dangerous. If you're having casual sex, you could get a sexually transmitted disease. AIDS is still around. I think in a way, what we've taught our kids and what I encourage the young people that I work with, experiment with sex. Care about the people that you're experimenting with. Find people who care about you.
All right. Yeah, there we go. 72% of men and 80% of women experience depression and poor mental health after having casual sex. Now, a couple of things here. It's amazing to me, number one, the that all of the biblical and moral sorry the biblical sorry all of the biblical ethical and moral positions, so what the scripture talks about, holiness, honoring God, how we should live our life, all of the ethical and moral positions in the Bible can be backed up by data and how it impacts humans. So regardless of the morality of it, like, doesn't matter as long as you're two consenting adults if you have sex, regardless of like our morality of that. This is a great example. Casual sex, for example, according to the data, is just not good for you. And you see this time and time and time again when Jesus talks about the way to honor God, the way to follow Him, and it gives like moral and ethical principles. The data also suggests like if you don't do this, it's just not good for you. Which, by the way, it makes sense that if God loves us, cares for us, and wants good for us, then when He says, "Hey, I have these commands and rules and things for you to do to follow if you want to experience Me to the fullest," He's doing it not to be restrictive or to hold us back, because He knows here's how I've created you, and here's how you will experience the best, most fulfilling life. And casual sex is just another example. So that being said, too, I just want to point out this just another reminder that humans are not machines, that our bodies matter. What we do with them or to our bodies, they matter. What we do to our bodies stays with us, whether it's sexual things, transgenderism, anything, self-harm, whatever. Like, we are not machines. We take our bodies with us forever, and what we do to them impacts us always. And always, our bodies matter. I also want to say, while of course casual sex can be enjoyable in the moment, just like a lot of things that are not actually good for us are enjoyable in the moment, otherwise we would never do them. So just because it can be enjoyable in the moment, it is objectively not good for you long term. Like, objectively long term, it is not good for you. I found it interesting that she referred to sex as both sacred at the beginning of the clip. So she calls it sacred, and then she goes on to explain, therefore, here's why casual sex is bad, which fully agree. But then she ended by saying that she encourages young people to experiment with sex. But then she also gives a caveat, but care about people you are experimenting with. So she's kind of like, hey, don't just do this casually. Make sure they really care about you. And then you can like experiment together. And I just want to say, listen, you actually cannot have it both ways. You cannot say on the one hand, hey, casual sex is bad. And on the other hand, I'm assuming she would probably affirm this position, two consenting adults that actually love and care about each other. So certainly not a one night stand, but actually they say they care about each other. As long as they do stuff, it's fine. As long as, there's a commitment there. That you can't have a both ways. And here's what I mean, because we can just justify anything. Here's what I mean by this. Anybody, for example, can say, well, I actually really care about this person, whether it's a one night stand, a 3-month thing, a year-long thing, or more. We can always say, well, I care about this person to justify sleeping with them. And so here's just my suggestion on reflecting on this. How can we ensure the person that you are sleeping with is someone that you care about and they care about you? Like, is there an objective way for us to actually like make sure that actually happens, not some subjective feeling in the moment? I would recommend setting up some sort of objective measure that both people involved can know whether or not the person that they're sleeping with cares about them. Now, what could that be, or what could we call it? I'm just going to throw it out there. We could call it something like marriage. We could call it marriage. Now, by the way, sexual satisfaction goes down, generally speaking. This is all hard data. The more sexual partners you have, the less sexually satisfied you are. Now, here's the reality. And of course, those who have one partner are generally speaking the most sexually satisfied. Now, sex, however, I just want to point this out, is not hard to figure out. So one of the justifications of like, you got to sleep around, you got to do this thing, you got to make sure you're quote unquote compatible, is to like act like it's some like brain science, rocket science thing to do. It is very easy to figure out, number one. Number two, it will always be better with someone who actually does know you and actually does care about you. Now, I'm not trying to be too graphic here, but if you know someone, love someone, they know you and they love you, and you know what each other likes, what is pleasurable to one another, A, that can be better for you. But B, it's like, hey, this person like wants good for me. They actually do care about me beyond just what they can get from me in the bedroom. It will always be better when you're actually with someone who loves and cares for you and has objectively committed to do so. Now, again, I don't know Commissar's personal beliefs here, and while she encourages at least better than casual sex with strangers, like don't do that, I would agree. That's not the Christian position. Again, the Christian position is that sex is good and beautiful, and it is for people who care for each other as demonstrated by the covenantal commitment of marriage. That's how you know whether or not someone actually cares about you, is if they will commit to you. Also want to say this, people are communal. There are communal. And so today, like we're super individualistic and we always want to individualize our lives and these days. And so we assume falsely that we're like these fully autonomous people that whatever decision we make, as long as it quote unquote doesn't hurt other people, it's totally fine. The more we think that, the harder life will be. And casual sex is a symptom of thinking that, well, I can do whatever I want as long as I don't harm somebody and get away with it. Well, man, you're actually making yourself more depressed and anxious, and you're making the person you're casually sleeping with more depressed and anxious. The harder life will be, the more you kind of feel like, well, I'm just living my life. I can do whatever I want without realizing how it affects your community and the people around you. Listen, we need community, and we need healthy community to thrive. So, how do you want to have a better relationship? You commit to one another through the objective measure of marriage, and then generally speaking, you'll have better sex. Now, my book review, this is a book review, Think Faster, Talk Smarter by Matt Abrahams. Think Faster, Talk Smarter. Now, this book is a book about how to speak better in spontaneous situations, whether it's in everyday conversations, maybe being called on to answer a question at school or in a meeting. It could be participating in a Q&A after a presentation, etc. It's basically about how to be more prepared in situations that you didn't prepare for. Now, the book talks about really smart people who can like clam up, who like know their material, then they get asked a question they weren't prepared for, or in the meeting last second they're say, hey, can you talk more about this? And like this really smart, intelligent person all of a sudden like doesn't know what to do. And so this book was about how to be more prepared in unprepared situations. Now, going into the book, I wondered how an entire book could be devoted to such a niche topic. Like, how are you going to write an entire book on just like spontaneous speaking? After reading the book, I still wondered the same thing. Now, I will share some things I took away from the book, but the big downside was like, yeah, that shouldn't have been a whole book. Overall, the book primarily focused on the spot communication, though some parts did touch on public speaking more generally. So I do want to give it to the book. Like, it really did kind of try to focus on its topic. Here's the problem. At the end of the day, I did not find the book very helpful at all. Didn't find it very helpful. It suffered from trying to give way too many pieces of advice or things to remember or things to think about and things to try. And by the way, there's simply no way to retain all of it. Therefore, after I read the book, I'm like, I don't know what to do with any of it. Now, again, if you're going to write a book on such a small topic, then the only way to make it book length is to give a lot of tips and ideas and tricks and principles and that sort of thing. So I get it. But man, when you're given so many things, hey, do this, try this, think this, like it's just impossible. And one of my big complaints is someone who reads a lot of books and reads a lot of books on, personal development. And I always want to give the caveat, yes, it's way easier to criticize a book than to write a book. So I just want to say that. But man, when these books, I'm not against like giving multiple principles and practices, but really like focus overall on like one or two main, like what is the main one or two ideas from the book? And if I want to pick and choose other things, that's great. But I got to be walking away with one or two things. Okay, hey, do this main thing overall, and this area of your life will go better. I couldn't do that for this book. And in fact, by the time I read, I was like, I don't even. Now, some of the stuff it offers in the book is actually like a really good idea, especially the last third of the book. It was like more like practical, but there's just so much stuff I couldn't take away from it. So that's not to say there aren't helpful tips and ideas throughout the book. There are. I just didn't find the book format effective, as the only way to stretch, again, out a specific topic into an entire book like this is to overload it with advice and exercises. And I'm someone who, like, given my job, does get to speak a lot. And I'm still like, this is too much. In the end, it was too informational to be useful. I honestly couldn't tell you even one or two specific takeaways I'd want to try because there were just so many. So my rating was a 4 out of 10. Again, 8 out of 10 means I recommend, and for pretty much generally everybody. 6 or 7 means there are some things I liked about it, but maybe depending on if you're interested in this topic, you should read the book. But generally speaking, it might be kind of tough. 5 or lower is like I just wouldn't really recommend it at all. And because there's so much here, I wouldn't. That being said, some things I did take away from the book. That you can be good at spontaneity. I'm big on this. You can be good at public speaking, spontaneity, talking of all sorts. Again, way too many things in this book because it was like too much information. But he does walk through common prompts and ways of talking about things, kind of like a roadmap. So you may, for example, not know what you're going to be asked to spontaneously speak about tomorrow or in a conversation with a friend, but you will be able to navigate it better on the spot if you have a roadmap of here is how I talk about things. So in that regard, it's just like, listen, you can get better at anything. Like, we can get better at virtually anything, and we give way too much credit to talent and undervalue skill. In part, again, because I think it makes us feel better. So it's easy to say someone's really talented or gifted. They were just born that way. And we could say, well, I'm not, so I can't do that thing. And to say, hey, they worked really hard at it. And they got good at this because they worked really hard at it. Because then it implies, well, I could get better at it too if I wanted to, but I don't want to. So I'm just going to say it's talent. And so I just want to say a thing I did take away from the book is that anyone can become a better communicator than they are right now. Like you can get better at virtually anything than you are right now. It does not mean you're going to be professional or one of the top 1% or better than everybody else, but you can improve. And so one of the things I did appreciate about this book is like, listen, you can get better at speaking. Absolutely, everybody can. And when we say things like, well, I'm just not good enough, or I just don't have the talent, or I just have no idea how someone could do that, and we're setting ourselves up to stay exactly where we are. So I do appreciate about that book that you can get better if you put effort into it. However, the book itself was not helpful. As always, thank you so much for joining me today on The Intentional Life. I'd be so happy if you were to share this podcast, this show with others. If you want more from me, again, you can always go to DylanDodson.com. And don't forget, this show is also on YouTube, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel where I also share tips and tricks of how to be more productive and efficient with your life as well. Thanks for being with me today, and I'll be back with you next week for another episode of The Intentional Life.